Belal Muhammad versus Lyman Good is set to take place on the main card of UFC Fight Night 173 Vegas 3, Blaydes versus Volkov, and I can't wait for this matchup this weekend. We're at welterweight, we're outside the rankings, and welterweight, in my opinion, has some of the best non-ranked fighters in all of the UFC. I mean, outside the rankings at welterweight is a talent-stacked pool, but it contains 3 different types of characters. It contains veterans that are still clinging on for dear life. It also can contain a prospect that has maybe fallen off and somewhat sinking down those rankings, and it also contains the guys outside the rankings that are still a threat to the top 15, and Belal Muhammad and Lyman Good are 2 of those type of guys. I like this matchup. I really do. I think it's a great matchup to make. I'm so glad it's getting the spotlight on the main card, which it deserves. Belal Muhammad is a hilarious guy. I'm sure he could be an amazing addition to the UFC in terms of marketing him, because he can speak well on the microphone. He fights through Ramadan like a badass. He's done it before. I understand he's not doing it this time, but it has played a part in his fight camp. He's an absolute savage. I like Belal Muhammad. I just think that Lyman Good's going to get this one done in the first round by KO. I've been paying attention to both of their careers, and I've watched a few of their fights. This is a close fight to predict, by the way, and I think a lot of people right now are on the fence thinking, right, who do I pick here, Lyman Good or Belal Muhammad? I'm going with Lyman Good. Number one, he's an underdog, which I kind of like, because I think this is a 50-50 a fight that it can get, but I still think that Lyman Good would have won. Even if he wasn't an underdog, even if Lyman Good was a favourite, I probably still would have picked him here, because Lyman Good has such an advantage in the stand-up here that if Belal Muhammad manages to outstrike him, there's nothing to describe it other than maybe Belal Muhammad has gone to Thailand for a year and we just haven't heard about it, okay? Because Belal Muhammad's stand-up in a lot of his fights is good enough to get past certain opponents in the UFC, like Chance Rencounter, who isn't much of a stand-up fighter. In the first round against Curtis Millender, he was having some problems with the stand-up, but then again, Curtis Millender fades as the fight goes on. Belal Muhammad was able to take over and basically expose some holes in Curtis Millender's takedown defense. Against Takashi Sato, he kind of went to work, but then again, that's Takashi Sato, and then he beat Tim Means by split decision. And then he beat Randy Brown, and, you know, he had a decent performance there, but again, went to a decision against Jordan Mean as well, who Emil Meek was able to beat and out-wrestle, I'll have you know. I just see a limit on who Belal Muhammad can beat, because he has some losses in his career. Jeff Neal, Vicente Luque, Alan Jouban as well, even though it was a really close fight. He went to a split decision with Tim Means as well. It seems as though the people who have somewhat of an understanding of takedown defense are able to shake off Belal Muhammad. Lyman Good has those fundamental takedown defense techniques. He really does, and you saw that in his Chance Rencounter fight. And the difference is, if you go and watch both of these guys' Chance Rencounter fights, Belal Muhammad looked good against Chance Rencounter, but Lyman Good looked great. Even though his surname would tell you otherwise, he looked great against Chance Rencounter and completely dismantled him. And not to mention, dismantled Chance Rencounter, who's a great wrestler who tried to take down Lyman Good. Lyman Good shook him off and balanced on one leg like it was nothing and immediately got back to a good position, shook off Chance Rencounter and went back to work. But Lyman Good broke his foot in that Chance Rencounter fight in the first round and still went on to absolutely dismantle Chance Rencounter and get the finish by third round TKO. I just feel as though Lyman Good is too good for Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad has beaten a lot of opponents, but it's very clear to me that there seems to be a step up in competition that Belal Muhammad can't quite seem to get over. Vicente Luque KO'd him in the first round. Vicente Luque is not... I know he's got power in his hands, don't get me wrong, but as we've seen in his fights, sometimes it takes a while for him to get going. For Vicente Luque to KO you in the first round, that puts you, in my opinion, with the likes of Jarlin Turner on the feet, who's a decent guy, but maybe not well-rounded enough to be good in the UFC. Belal Muhammad has good stand-up. Very good. He can beat guys like Chance Rencounter who don't have good stand-up. He can beat guys like Jordan Mean who maybe shouldn't be in the sport at this point. He can beat guys like a young Randy Brown who's still got things to learn. But then when he takes the step up against some real competition, he seems to struggle. I think Lyman Good is that real talented competition in the welterweight division right now that's going to give Belal Muhammad that trouble, and I think that actually Lyman Good is going to finish this in the first round. I'm just looking at Belal Muhammad's career here. He's beaten a lot of guys, but one thing I noticed about Belal Muhammad is he seems to show these guys their problems. Lyman Good has been shown his problems in his game. Curtis Millender gassed out and had no takedown defense whatsoever against Belal Muhammad. He didn't even try and defend takedowns against Belal Muhammad. He looked as though he just sort of accepted it happening because there was nothing he could do about it. That's That's a hole in Curtis Millender's game that has not been addressed, that Belal Muhammad has been able to expose. And he can do that to a lot of these young guys that aren't as seasoned as a guy like Lyman Good. But Lyman Good has been around the block. He's been to a decision with Andrei Korshkov in his first loss, or not his first loss, in his third loss of his career. His first loss of his career was to Ben Askren. If you don't think losing to this level of competition over at Bellator this early in his career is going to round him out to be a well-rounded fighter, especially at his age, I know he's pretty old and maybe it would seem like he was going to start to slow down. At 35, like, Lyman Good is not a normal 35-year-old. That seems very clear. He's been on fire recently. I know he lost to Damian Maia, but let's be fair, Damian Maia is a pretty tricky opponent for a lot of fighters in the division. I would bet Damian Maia would completely destroy Belal Muhammad, take him down and choke him out, in all honesty. I think Belal Muhammad has been able to get a lot of these guys before they have addressed the holes in their game and has been able to make them look foolish because of it. But Lyman Good has addressed all of his holes in his game recently, and he goes straight to work with the takedown defense. I've watched some of Belal Muhammad's fights that he's won against Curtis Millender, against Chance Rencounter as well. Even Chance Rencounter. When Belal Muhammad took Chance Rencounter down in that first round, Rencounter got straight back up because he understands the fundamentals of wrestling. So does Lyman Good. I think he's going to get straight back up if this fight does hit the canvas, and he's going to completely outclass Belal Muhammad on the feet with a power that Belal Muhammad is not used to since fighting a guy like Jeff Neal. And Belal Muhammad has been KO'd before by Vicente Luque. Now, he hasn't been KO'd often, so I'm not going to question his chin. I just think that the striking difference on the feet in the first round between him and Lyman Good, and especially with Lyman Good being that explosive, I don't think it's going to be a good situation for Belal Muhammad. I really don't. I think Lyman Good's going to land one clean on his chin. He's got the reach advantage. He's got the size advantage. He's got the strength advantage as well. Belal Muhammad might have a bit of a cardio advantage. But then again, in Lyman Good's last fight with Chance Rencounter, broke his foot in the first round, and Joe Rogan never stopped talking about it on the commentary. He kept saying that Lyman Good has cardio issues and he tends to slow as the fight goes on. Lyman Good showed that he no longer has those issues. You know what I mean? He's fixing his game every time we see him go out there, and he has the basic level of understanding of takedown defense that I think is required to beat a guy like Belal Muhammad, who is very good, but he can look sloppy and even in some cases lose against people who have the fundamentals of MMA down, like Alan Jouban. I thought that was a close fight, by the way, that could have arguably maybe gone to Belal Muhammad, but it was close, and it went to Alan Jouban because of the knockdown in round 2 and 1. I completely understand. Then you look at fights like Vicente Luque where he got completely obliterated. That's not Vicente Luque being 10 times better than Belal Muhammad. That's Vicente Luque being a capable striker. You know what I mean? He doesn't have to be 10 times better than Belal Muhammad to KO him in the first round. He just needs to be this much better. A tiny amount better can go a long way in MMA, and I think Lyman Good is just that little bit better than Belal Muhammad. And in previous fights in Belal Muhammad's career, when he comes up against an opponent that is perceived to be a little bit better than him in certain areas of the fight, he seems to choke and lose because he can't have his way with them like he can with a guy who has not addressed any problems in his game of Curtis Millender, who gassed out in the second round, who didn't try and fight off takedowns almost whatsoever. I mean, there were moments in that fight with Curtis Millender where he had every opportunity to look for an underhook or scoop the hands up of Belal Muhammad and try and shimmy off a takedown, but Belal Muhammad just easily got it because Curtis Millender, you could see it in the fight, it seemed as though if things didn't go his way, he was just going to allow the bad shit to happen to him. And that's what Belal Muhammad can do to people. I just feel as though Lyman Good has been through way too much in his career to have those fundamental flaws that a lot of these other guys that Belal Muhammad has fought have. I think Lyman Good is in the good here. I think he's going to be in the all clear. I think he's going to take out Belal Muhammad in the first round. That's nothing to disrespect Belal Muhammad. He's an amazing fighter. I think we've just found his peak. And you could say the same about Lyman Good, but I think Lyman Good is better than him. Lyman Good's been on an absolute streak, got back into the UFC, lost to Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, who before his last loss was on a 7-fight win streak in the UFC. That's no shame to lose to a guy like Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, especially on the feet for 3 rounds by split decision. That's a very good sign for me, but losing to a guy like Tim Means by split decision, I consider that a much worse thing than losing to a guy like Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos by split decision. Losing to a guy like Damian Maia, I consider that a much better thing than losing and getting destroyed by a guy like Vicente Luque, especially at that point in Luque's career when it was in 2012 or 2016, sorry, it was in December of 2016. The Americans fucking switched their dates around like cunts. 2016 Luque was a very different Luque, and if that Luque can KO you in the first round who hasn't been shown the ropes by Wonderboy yet, I think it's going to be problems when he comes up against a fast, explosive guy like Lyman Good, who has the power in that first round, who has the fast twitch muscle fiber that is needed to commit that much KO power. Also has the reach advantage as well. I just think everything is in the favour of Lyman Good, and he's going to get a dust-up KO in the first round. And if he wins this one, I'd like to see the winner maybe get a shot against a guy like Vicente Luque, Robbie Lawler, Neil Magny. The list goes on inside the bottom of those rankings right now. There's a bunch of people looking for opponents. Listen, maybe the winner of this one would be the... Listen, I don't think Jeff Neal deserves to take on a guy ranked below him. I don't think Vicente Luque deserves to take on a guy ranked below him either. I don't think Robbie Lawler deserves to take on a guy ranked below him. Maybe Robbie Lawler more than other people, but still, these guys want to fight guys up the rankings, I understand. So maybe the winner of this fight could be the fighter to welcome back Santiago Ponzinibbio, who has no stake in the division right now, is not ranked, and the winner of that one would get a nice little saucy position at number 13, and we'll say no more about it. Belal Muhammad versus Lyman Good, winner takes on Santiago Ponzinibbio for his comeback. I look forward to it. I just think Lyman Good's going to be too fast, too powerful, and just that little bit better than Belal Muhammad, that when opponents have been that little bit better in Belal Muhammad's career, he seems to have struggled. And I think Lyman Good is one of those opponents outside the rankings, and he's going to obliterate Belal Muhammad in the first round. But I am rooting for either one of these guys, honestly. I really kind of want Belal Muhammad to win. He's hilarious on Instagram. I think he was the guy who started this whole train like Tony Ferguson meme that went around not too long ago. Belal Muhammad is a hilarious guy. He always seems to be in MMA news for something that he's posted. Very marketable. I'd like to see him succeed, especially because he's the younger guy as well. I don't know how long Lyman Good has left on the shelf because he's only 35. He's 35 now. You know, even if you're Yoel Romero, you start showing signs around that time period. You know, like Lyman Good is good, but I don't think he's going to be good for much longer. But for right now, I think he's right on cue to destroy Belal Muhammad in the first round. On the feet, with chance Rencounter, Belal Muhammad looked good, but just a little bit better than Rencounter. Lyman Good made Rencounter look like he had no business being in the cage with him. That's what I'm basing this off of. Not just that, obviously the other reasons in this video as well. But Lyman Good, I believe, is going to get the KO finish. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button there. Goodbye.